America, Inc., citizens will have to pay for the right to vote. I predict that corporate sponsorship will become a requirement for citizenship in America, Inc., that everyone will have a corporate logo tattooed on their forehead in exchange for the right to work and live, and that those without such a logo will become untouchables and be forced underground. I predict that parents will have to register their newborns with their corporate employer in order to obtain a birth certificate and social security number for their child. I predict that in exchange for citizenship in corporate America, each child will belong to its corporate sponsor, and that parents will then be seen as surrogate caregivers whose role it is to raise that child until the time comes to deliver it into the hands of its corporate sponsor.
So it's always good to get, show businesses and corporate world that, the gay folks are, a buying power and a buying medium, and that it's good to be able to, look for them and make them as a, how can I say it, as, as players, I guess, on the business field,
Commercialism is a horrible thing. Corporate culture is a disaster. Gay people want into these things that are just like hell.
One's very being starts to become the brand, starts to become the object that spreads the message of what's to be bought and sold.
And we're just, we're literally from the bottoms of our shoes to the tops of our heads covered in logos. We're instruments of a consumer culture. It's the opiate. I mean, it's the ultimate sort of, it's a bait and switch. We can't adopt kids. We don't have good, protection in the workplace. We can go on and on with the list of all the ways in which our civil rights are virtually minimal. And yet people sit around feeling self-satisfied when, Melissa Etheridge publishes a dumb book.
And you only need to go so far as to look at the incredible success of Will and Grace, which I think actually has done more to advance the cause of gay and lesbian rights and tolerance than probably just about anything else.
I think the trick is to not be fooled, to think that that's the same thing as some kind of actual sense of social justice, or to think that that's actually what America at some real, deep level actually feels or believes towards us.
I think that's exactly it. It's that everyone's clamoring so hard for visibility and clamoring so hard for any gay image that the fact that these programs do all the same hideous stuff that all TV on all mainstream movies do in terms of establishing body images and establishing consumer norms and product placement and race stereotypes and gender stereotypes and gender normativity. All of that is okay, as long as there's a gay character in there.
We don't have to have extremists or radical positions or aggressions or statements that is no longer necessary.
It's such a spending market. The high disposable income.
Gays and lesbians are perceived to at least have more expendable income.
It's a market that has a higher medium income than most average household.
Well, they're the ones with expendable income.
It's a big market. There's a lot of dollars in that population.
It further fragments the queer community because from the very beginning, this idea of being part of a demographic that has disposable income is frankly not true. And as a matter of fact, most queers don't. And a lot of statistics show that particularly women, lesbians in particular, have the least amount of money and the least amount of clout economically.
We'll accept, your gay endorsement on any terms. We don't care what else your politics are, and we don't care how else you're killing tons of people with your policies, as long as you're good on gay issues.
These really are very tempting fruits. I mean, it does feel good to everyone. It's hard to not look at these things and feel a little bit of relief when we feel so deprived of access to the larger culture.
Budweiser's had a long-standing commitment to the gay community.
That, to me, is the ultimate future where, you know, you have a gay-themed ad that can run in mainstream media and have people go, oh, okay.
As I look back on it, yeah, kind of having this feeling of, oh, yeah, they're like marketing to me, they're catering to me, and sort of having this sense of power about it, but then not thinking at the time what kind of power that is, if being marketed to is really power.
What's put out by the mainstream in terms of what, you know, gay people are, it's all around like, you know, consumerist. They're, you know, it's like, it's just, they use the gay culture as like this consumerist culture.
How has the nature of the Pride marches changed from the beginning to as it is right now?
This movement has become so capitalist. It is a capitalist movement. You know, the first 4 years was basically fun. I mean, the festival took place right on Christopher Street, and everything was moderately priced. I didn't believe that I would have to sit here 32 years later and basically bitch about the fact that gay have become so capitalist.
Yeah, gay pride really is, you know, not what I need. It really is like sort of consumerist and racist and just not the politics that really feeds my life.
This is no longer my pride. I gave them their pride, but they have not given me mine.
I think that there definitely is, you know, a difference between someone who's coming from a queer radical perspective and another queer person who isn't necessarily coming from a very progressive or radical perspective. I think on the one hand, you have a group of people who are saying, you know, we're interested in the transformation of society to rid, you know, society of inequity, you know, be it about race or be it about sexuality or what have you. And on the other hand, with say non-radical people, non-radical queer people, you might say that that they might be, you know, fighting for a piece of the pie, fighting against job discrimination, but not necessarily fighting against, you know, capitalism in general.
We started meeting, I believe the first meeting was in July, but I could be wrong. Because thinking back, that seems very late to have a first meeting for an October gathering, but most meetings were between 30 and 50 people with one facilitator. We rotated facilitation. But the agenda was largely set every meeting so that people would go around and tell the facilitator what they wanted to talk about or what they wanted to be on the agenda. We took notes. We made notes available via email after the meetings. There was a listserv that was started. We probably had, I don't remember, 10 or 15 committees, from food to housing to entertainment to outreach. And so we would go around and every committee would check in. There would usually be someone there from every committee.
Well, we barely got here this morning, but it's pretty cool so far. I don't know.
So many people have come so far wanting to come early and help out and pitch in.
Happy to see like an agenda for a queer event this radical that incorporated other issues besides identity politics.
I'm particularly interested in in integrating like queer politics with radical politics. And so in order to be become more efficient at being like an anti-racist, anti-capitalist, feminist, queer activist. So it's good to be here in that respect.
And for me, one of the things that started me off in my path as a revolutionary was being a lesbian and being oppressed because of that, and being fucked over because of that, and hating injustice because I hated what was done to me, and then I could understand, how what was done to other oppressed people was unjust.
Class struggle feminism is a totally different thing. It's not about getting the power to have power over people. It's about making everybody equal.
Some people go to school and read books, or they read books without going to school, and then it's nice to see those ideas recycled in zines or in song lyrics or something. Because, not everybody gets around to reading those books.
Skill sharing workshops is the biggest thing that I think really needs to go on everywhere. Learning how to do stuff yourself and being able to get outside the capitalist world.
I think is a very important part.
The documentation of all the work that went into queer.
All the background work that goes into making a queer radical Quenthro function.
I went to the Horse Caucus, which is really cool. And we swapped ideas, and most of us have been in the sex service before, so we swapped ideas and thoughts.
Well, it's not what I expected. I felt like I would be amongst friends forever immediately, but I don't know. There's a lot of different attitudes. Everyone's not the same as me, and I don't know. It's a little more coarse than I thought it would be. But I'm still meeting some really neat people.
I guess the biggest part of conferences is networking, and Queer Eruption is a chance for people from different communities or queer activists that have a certain sort of shared agenda to get together and sort of hopefully share resources and skills.
I wanted to be involved in Queer Eruption because basically this kind of queer grouping has been really rare in my life, but something I've always been really hungry for, starving actually.
I've been doing queer conferences since I was 15, and doing workshops at them, and being really involved, but it was very much a different kind of queer scene. It was way more the we want to just mainstream, we all want to wear Gap, we all want to just get in there and be American.
Because there's too much in queer culture, this desire to assimilate into regular mainstream culture, which is basically living up to the typical racist sexism and classism that exists.
I couldn't connect to gay culture that I had seen in other places, and so I was just I can't relate to you, I can't be in your community, and so it's exciting to me when I feel like I can relate to people, and that my internal identity can find other people.
Just because they're girls that sleep with girls or girls that date girls, that doesn't mean that they're my people, because they're fucking conservative and middle class and all this shit, and that just means nothing to me. Their concerns are not my concerns.
This is the first time that I've ever felt that I actually have a community, that there are people who understand all the different political issues that I'm interested in.
Being queer in Montana doesn't happen. It's not a way of life. Everything that I learned here, I would spread it out to the people there.
Domestic violence workshop that they called yesterday on top of the roof was super awesome.
The workshop that I'm really excited about is the People of Color Caucus, just to have a chance, because there's all those different levels of alienation that happen of not feeling part of the queer or mainstream gay community, but also having some sense of not fitting into being people of color communities that that we're from.
I'm looking for many workshops on trans inclusion.
And what?
Trans inclusion.
I liked the Camp Trans workshop a lot because I felt like we were doing something there. We were moving towards a goal and maybe arguing a bit on the way.
I want to go to Ruckus, the queer self-defense one.
I never got to be a cheerleader because of
my school, fat girls weren't allowed to be cheerleaders. But I like this because you get to say dirty things real loud.
Yeah. Turtle beads for, you put them in to fill up your bicycle tire dildo, right? Yeah.
The black stuff is the inner tube from a bike. And I cut it open and wrapped it around. And some orange, what is this, electrical tape?
How long did it take you to make that?
20 minutes.
My baby got sanctified booty, and I swear I'm saved by what you did to me. And God smiled down, it's a blessing to you. Know the good thing when the good thing's what you see. Come on now, testify.
I'm Ben from New York. Don't know enough public sex scenes at all.
We can talk about, well, if I have the money and they're more expensive, I can make an informed choice. If I can afford these, then I'm helping them with businesses, and that's another sort of political, economic statement I can be making.
I was involved with Queer Eruption in London, in Brixton, and so I had some idea that it was going to be a queer anarchist sort of radical space to explore lots of different issues, and there would be room to kind of develop it as it went along and suggest debates and stuff.
I really can appreciate the kind of social analysis and social criticism that's going on, because it's kind of like understood that we're anti-capitalistic, which is something you kind of have to prove or tell other people about when you're doing queer activism.
I want to radicalize, I want to free up, I want to let loose and allow anarchy to reign, which is not chaos, it's just like freedom to be able to intermingle and be-mingle and change things that allows people to participate more and change the mind and learn from each other and change the patterns as we see fit, not just I see fit or they see fit.
You know, revolution, the big R word, I believe happens through the process of something. Not necessarily the end product.
Radicalism is that process of living your revolution every day.
I caught it.
I think the action tomorrow night, the Take Back Central Park action, will go really well, and I'm excited about that.
We're here, we're queer, we're taking back the park. We're here, we're queer, we're taking back the park.
What cops would say is that they're stopping illegal activities like cruising and like prostitution. But what's clear from these instances is that queers are being arrested simply for being queer. And so this action, the Take Back Central Park action, is to create a safe space for all queers to flame, be loud, have fun, and to show the real danger in the park, which is not cruising queers, but racist, homophobic cops.
We're here, we're queer, we're taking back the park.
Can I go? Thank you.
I guess in general, I just wanted to see like what was going on with like radical queer activism, to see how inclusive it was of all different people and different generations and different ideas.
I don't see a lot of people of color represented here, and I don't see on the workshops and stuff, I don't see a lot of people of color centered workshops, and I think that the anti-racist workshop is a good one, but I would have liked to see more discussion over the entire weekend.
A really essential lacking of this radical conference is that race has not been one of the essential categories in everything we're talking about. It has been marginalized. And so how can we have a radical queer politic if we are ignoring this major aspect of every interaction we have in the society? That's where it becomes bullshit, and that's where it becomes questionable, and that's what needs to be addressed on a very political, systematic level, not just on a personal, how you doing, what's up.
What's so frustrating is that we have to be like, why is it that we walked into this conference and we're all like, oh shit, everyone's white here, but like, why don't they walk in and say the same
oh shit,
everyone looks like me and is white here?
If you're gonna advertise fucking queer of color, like, fuck, don't do that. Like, don't
Don't like bring us to all white conference. I'm like fucking pissed off about this.
Yeah, I wonder if it's occurring to people that the reason we have to have this caucus is because there's so few of us here. When I try to talk to people who aren't people of color to talk about why I feel uncomfortable, like they can't, it's hard to kind of pinpoint what it is and like explain to them what it feels like, what it feels like. But the thing that I've sort of come up with recently, and I'd like to hear if other people feel this, is that what's really important is being able to see reflections of yourself to affirm that, like, who you are.
I'm trying to find a space to be radical in, to be a person of color in, and to heal in with.
Trying to figure out when are the right moments for me to talk about race, and not to seem complicit in everything. This space right now is like what I really need to hear at this conference, because I feel like there's so much hypocriticalness in what people like to call the radical community, when it's really not, because they don't deal with a lot of their own issues. The propaganda for Queer Eruption was let's push the corporate capitalist, like the typical like queer culture scene, but really it's like shifting it to a different scene. Like instead of rainbows and running capitalists, we're the anti-capitalists, but running around with the same classism and racism.
If you don't have things that people of color want to talk about, and if you don't have organizers from the beginning who are people of color, then why the fuck would non-white people want to come to these things? And like, you're not like addressing any issues that we want to talk about.
Well, I think that that's one of the issues, not having enough workshops on, people of color issues. I think, however, like the main problem is not incorporating the separate dynamics that would happen if color was involved.
And everyone in this room is radically queer, and that we all want to make a change. That's why we're all here. We're willing to do whatever it takes to address these issues, race issues, tranny issues. When the organizers when the organizers put together those flyers and they're sending out all these flyers, they were not discriminating to who was going to get these flyers.
I want to be called on my homophobia because I am homophobic also. I want to be called on my racism because I am a racist. I want to be called on my sexism because I exhibit these behaviors. I'm working through shit. We all are. We are all in this process. This is a really big fucked up world. We are all coming here to begin to address it all.
And for me, like, I don't care if those issues are raised again and again, because for me, Queer Eruption isn't about one weekend where people come, everything's fabulous and fine, and no, hang on, it's not a joke. The minute people walk into the door, everything is organized and perfect. Queer Eruption is a start. It's not about this weekend being perfect. It's about building something. It's about creating something.
I think that a starting point for activists has to be like an examination of their own privilege, of our own privilege.
In terms of specific groups, that doesn't necessarily mean that, that white queer radicals are always going to get it concerning racism, because if you're part of a community that's so insular as to be separate from other people of color, or as to be separate from, say, queer activists of color, then you're also becoming separate from a wealth of experience and a wealth of knowledge about strategies to combat racism and about experiences involving racism. So that definitely has a negative impact there. So I think you certainly have the vision in mind of, of a transformed society, but not necessarily the connection with other people.
These are the same issue. This is, these things happen simultaneously to our bodies, police brutality, racism, transphobia, poverty. All of these issues should be essential to a gay identity and to a gay activism, not something that you have to put aside in order to go out and do gay activism that's based on the experiences basically of like people who don't experience other kinds of oppression.
Really believe that what you're doing is right, and
in your heart. I mean, that's how most of us come to this. It's because it's in our heart. And so we have to do it. For some people, it's because the oppression is so great, they don't have a choice. You know, it's either change it or you die. So I think it's really about, you know, this relationship building and how we build these relationships, putting out our values, talking in proactive and pro-affirming ways, and really understanding that it's a process for people to change. That just as it took us a long time, it takes people a long time to change.
Capitalism or racism or those kinds of things that I was raised on are part of what's in my head, and so sometimes I do act inappropriately, and I need to not be afraid to hear that when someone calls me out on it, and not be afraid to learn how to do something new that's uncomfortable, about unlearning something I've learned.
How you break things down to people, how you make your ideas accessible to people, you have to be constantly asking yourself, you know.
Things like consensus, things like setting an agenda at the start of a meeting, things like go-arounds, language like that and organizing strategies were something that I was completely not familiar with I feel like that kind of stuff, while not exclusive to white people, is something that is you have to become familiar with.
And then someone walks in off the street because they saw a flyer or because their friend told them about this, and we don't know how to incorporate them into the process in a way that makes them feel like they're a part of something, but also that doesn't derail the meeting so much, so all we're doing is giving everyone background about what's already happened.
But there's real differences, and that I don't think that we have a really wonderful way to talk about our differences and to take advantage of those differences, that when there is conflict because of differences, we see that as a negative thing. And usually it manifests itself as a negative thing because we don't think in this society that conflict is actually a part of creativity and change, and that conflict is a harbinger of change.
And even the negative stuff that happens only, to me, happens to teach us a lesson as to how to move more positively into the future that we want to create, that we actually are the architects of our future.